And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter on this fine, cold Thursday here at Blaze Media. Your host, Daniel Hurwitz, back here today to discuss the issues that matter. The issue today that matters, the one that really propelled Trump to win the election along with inflation, was invasion. The fact that we had tens of millions of people violating our sovereignty, taking jobs, committing crimes, degrading the culture. It was mass deportation. And I'm here to tell you guys today that the plan has completely failed. Not only that, we get negative efficacy like the Pfizer COVID shot, in that he's taking a popular issue, making it unpopular by acting and talking boldly, but then focusing on photo ops, expending his political capital, frankly, on other things like Greenland and weirdness and tariffs and all this bizarre foreign policy, while the agenda burns. Last time in the first term, his immigration agenda, even at the border, failed because of the courts. Now he succeeded at the border, but as far as deportations, it's the same thing. The courts ate my homework. Now we have a national insurgency and domestic terrorism that has not been put down with the military over the last 12 months, a lack of serious and articulate regular use of the bully pulpit to remind the people why he had the mandate, why he needs to do this. And he had the capital. He had the political capital 12 months ago to rip the Band-Aid off. And I want to discuss what that means to rip the Band-Aid off, what could still be done. But instead, it's the worst of all, where he is acting tough, embarking on the mission, but then not completing it, thereby dragging it out, making it unpopular. And here's the thing, folks. Obviously, the border is 10 times more secure than under Biden. Obviously, we're deporting more people than under Biden. But if that is the best we can do, that according to the New York Times, there's only been 230,000 interior removals. Okay, that would be roughly a million over the course of 4 years, barely denting the 20 plus million we have here. That is an utter failure if it's coming on the heels of the greatest invasion and likely preceding the next Democrat president. And remember, each successive Democrat president gets worse, from Obama to Biden. The next one will bring in 50 million people. So if we don't create a permanent structure to shut down the rioting, to remove the people, and really to dissuade people from remaining here by actually enforcing interior law at the federal and state level and demagnetizing, then the Democrats are just going to gain back illegals with interest within the first, half year of the next presidency. So I want to get into the failures on this front, what could have been done, what should have been done, what could still be done. And then we'll get to a couple of other things as well. Of course, remember to like and subscribe here at Hurwitz Show on YouTube. If you're listening on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating so we get propelled above the algorithms. And if you are on Substack, you could follow me at Liberating Truths at Daniel Hurwitz on Substack. Okay, so folks, I think what people forgot about Trump, they get very confused because he says a lot of things. He's basically said everything that there is to say on every issue at some point. There's two Trumps. There are two playing fields politically that he operates in. There's the one he really cares about, and that is where 95% of his focus is. Cutter, big tech, crypto, pay for play. That's why he's into foreign policy, because of the perceived power plays like, oh, I'm making peace. He wants the Nobel Prize. He gets to throw his weight around. He's been talking about that a lot at Davos. So the self-aggrandizement, the making deals with foreign interests, that's where his focus is. Then you have the promises he made to the country, and particularly his political base, inflation, invasion, those two things, they take a back seat. He handles them differently. It's not that he doesn't attempt to do anything on that front. Some, as conservatives, we might agree with, a lot we might not, but he'll never see it through. Meaning, what's worse than not doing the proper job is embarking upon the issue to begin with, because then you taint it and make it unpopular. And this was the thing. Nothing's pretty. Immigration enforcement was never going to be pretty. He had to rip the Band-Aid off immediately. And then he had to go and constantly reinforce with the bully pulpit a seriousness of purpose, constantly following up to make the case rather than showing that everything is just petty, personal, photo ops, Christy Gnome's weirdness. And that's how you make a popular issue unpopular. But again, I want to show you where his real playing field is. There's a report out that Ballard Partners, it's the lobbying firm where Susie Wiles and Pam Bondi came from, perhaps the two most powerful people in the administration. They have enjoyed a 350% increase in their lobbying revenue. Now the most profitable lobbying firm in the country, more than $87 million in revenue in 2025. So how did it go up 350% from last year? From 2024? Well, 2025 is the first year that their two top guns were in the administration. I mean, that is where the focus is. It's all money. I'm sorry to tell you guys, if you're offended by it, I can't help you, but that's the reality. And you saw, for example, yesterday, the stock market moved wildly, and then gold responded wildly to the markets, where he announced he wouldn't attack Greenland when before he hinted he might, and then he announced he's no longer imposing a new 10% tariff on the EU. Now, look, every president has had influence over policy and therefore influence over the markets, but I don't think we have ever seen what we have witnessed over the last 12 months, where the president has in the palm of his hand this ability to make these capricious, erratic announcements back and forth, back and forth. When you look at all the people getting wealthy, including his own family, there's insider trading. See, there's no way his family and the people involved in these announcements, the Secretary of Commerce, Treasury, there's no way that they don't know that, look, he's about to announce something that's going to tank the market. He's about to rescind that announcement, and then it's going to go back up. And, imagine if you had some sort of machine that would tell you exactly when to buy, exactly when to sell. I mean, you could become a billionaire very quickly. It's all about risk, that most people can't afford a certain level of risk and uncertainty. Well, that is what Trump's family and his administration, that's what they have in the palm of their hand, at least in terms of day trading. So, when there's this focus on congressional insider trading, I support a complete ban on the stock portfolio. But the reality is that, folks, we need to apply this by a factor of 1,000,000 to the executive branch, because they have much more imminent information to do this. But anyway, my broader point is this is where his focus is. Now, where should his focus be? Where should it have been? Where should his purpose been? There's really 4 things that the president has failed to do or to see through and fully implement with regard to the deportation agenda. Number 1, we forget about incentives. It's all about incentives, demagnetizing, cutting off the schooling and identity theft and the ability to work. And like we're going to see in a minute, the president actually supports them working as long as they don't have a criminal record. So that way you avoid messy removals and the need to remove every last person. What we've seen over and over again is if you don't let them in, or if you don't offer them a way to stay here and they can't functionally remain in the country illegally, they will go home. So that hasn't been done. We haven't used ships as opposed to planes, which are much more efficient. We haven't used the military, and the few times he started, he pulled back to both assist with removals and also to put down the rebellion. Okay? And then also judicial supremacism. Judicial supremacism. This is really where the rubber meets the road. Because this is what tanked his border agenda the first term. This is what's tanking the deportation agenda. That courts do not have authority over this. And then, of course, there's state enforcement that serves as a force multiplier. But in addition to that, it also creates an enduring structure that when Democrats come into play, you know, you'll at least have the ability to have state-based removals. None of that has been done. And I want to go through in depth each one to give you a sense of how this would legally, practically, and logistically make it easier. And then also just with PR and public relations. But again, all along, there is no shortcut for using your bully pulpit to be serious and consistent and smart about it and not sound like a bungling buffoon where, you go from one direction to another. And then again, I'll just say, you can't, in politics, you can't look at issues in a vacuum. If you're president and you're doing a terrible job on economy, or you're sounding like Marie Antoinette and personal vendettas and personal stupidities on issue A, then that's going to taint issue B too. Everything you do is going to become unpopular. I mean, just like, going to a horse barn, anything that walks in will come out smelling. That's just the reality. So let's go through incentives. Incentives is the big one we have forgotten all along. I have a novel approach to illegal immigration, actually making it illegal to be here. And I know that sounds funny, but the reality is we don't. We say, don't come here, don't remain here. Oh, but if you're here, here's a job for you. If the president actually shut off the job magnet, not just a couple of ICE workside raids here and there, but actually went after the linchpin of identity theft and tax collection, the reality is they wouldn't be here. Now, you might think, well, Daniel, hasn't he hinted to the fact that he wants to do some of this stuff? Maybe he did. He says everything. But here is ultimately what Trump had to say yesterday, looking back on a year's worth of immigration enforcement.
Many countries opened up their prisons and dropped them into the United States. Those are the people who are getting out. And we have a lot of heart. They said, you got to lighten up on this. We have a lot of heart for people. They came in illegally, but they're good people, and they're working now on farms, and they're working in luncheonettes and hotels and all. And we're looking to get the criminals out right now, the criminals. And I think it's very important. I mean, every once in a while you see a story, we take somebody. He should be out because they came in illegally. So in theory, they should be. But we're focused on the murderers, the drug dealers, the mentally insane. We have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean, you can't even talk to them. It'd be nice if you could have a little reason, but you can't even reason. These are seriously ill people. You have a couple of countries where they were loaded up. Their mental institutions and insane asylums were loaded to the gills. They couldn't get. They're empty now. But they're filling up because we're bringing them all back. We know where they came from. And every country accepts them. Under Biden, they wouldn't say, they had so little respect that they'd bring them there and they wouldn't take them. They say, get the hell out of here. They would be bringing a plane in to land in a country.
All right. So, folks, that was the most incoherent thing I've ever heard. It was just bizarre. He sounds weird. This is what negative efficacy looks like. This is what it looks like to have a message everything the worst way possible, and then the polling drops because you sound like an idiot, and then it's no longer a winning issue, so then you're like, oh, well, it's not a winning issue, so now I have to backtrack. And, we only want to get out the criminals. But he said blatantly, by the way, that he ordered ICE. I don't want you getting rid of farm workers. I don't want you getting rid of construction. Well, that's it. I mean, you could have a narrative and say, look, there's an unemployment problem. We want Americans getting back in construction. That would be a winning, not just immigration message, but economic message as well. But instead, he muddles it all. And again, I want to make it clear. You don't have to, we don't know how many illegals there are. Let's say there's 20 million. But the reality is you don't have to deport all 20, 30 million illegals. There's a certain amount you do. If there's no jobs, then they won't remain here. But the president is saying blatantly that if you get a job, I don't want to deport you. And I've told ICE you're being too tough and back off. Well, that's why you're failing. It's that simple. So this is the forgotten aspect. You see the rioting, and we'll talk about that in the military issue and the ICE, physical removals. But I'm telling you, if we actually made it that you couldn't live here, then that's it. And you know what? As we're talking, I want to also just piggyback on my second issue, which is state enforcement. So number one is you want to lock in state enforcement right now when we have the chance, so that when Democrats come in, we can get, dissuade them from being in red states. But I just want to go down my list. I have a list of stuff here that states could be doing, the feds could be doing, and it all ties into the fact that you can't remain in the country illegally and not be vetted out. Inevitably, you have to interact with law enforcement, with state government, with the federal government, with work. If we just simply enforced that they couldn't live here, we could debate how many you would have to physically remove, but the majority of them would go home. They couldn't live here. But this has always been the contradiction. We'll do some deportations, but then everyone else is like, well, you can kind of stay here, don't stay here, but we won't enforce it. We'll turn a blind eye. And we all thought this was going to change. I mean, I didn't, but whatever. The president promised that. And I just, for all this stuff, notice that Trump had the biggest mandate of a modern era Republican president, particularly on the immigration issue. And notice not a single immigration bill has been signed into law. None of this stuff. So if you're not comfortable ignoring the courts and doing it on your own, you pass a bill. There should have been an omnibus bill. You get around the filibuster. It should have been in reconciliation. We talked about that many times, rather than the stupid tips and weird tax provisions that didn't solve anything on the other big issue, inflation. So you may as well focus on the second big issue, which was invasion and immigration. And on that front, he could have done kick the courts out of immigration, make it clear that states could do anything up until and including removals. But part of this is outlawing illegal presence in the states, allowing, because the courts are screwing with that, allowing states to outlaw illegal presence, allow counties. So now you get every layer of government. It is now a felony to remain in the country illegally. State, federal, and local. Jacksonville, Florida, passed something like that. And by the way, everything I'm going to mention on this list, Trump should not only pass a bill making it clear that states have the authority to do this, but also he should put out guidelines. He runs the Republican Party and they all rush to, oh, I want the Trump agenda. Instead, when DeSantis tried to do this, the legislature, a lot of them who are backed by Trump, they pushed back against him and said, we don't want street level enforcement, because Trump never pushed it. Criminalizing overstay of visas at a state and federal level. Believe it or not, it's not a felony to overstay visa. That needs to change in state and federal. Obviously, with employment. I mean, Florida is on the cusp of passing the toughest E-Verify law, but most states it's not enforced. Bar illegals from public school. And again, making it clear that states can do that. States should require disclosure of immigration status during every interaction. Motor vehicle registration, business license applications, welfare benefits, financial transactions, and all arrests. And require that of county governments as well. State agencies should maintain a database of all the information, including names, addresses, social security numbers. Share the information with ICE. Another one is ending the unaccompanied minor scam. This is a big one, the unaccompanied minor scam. Just looking at my list here, believe it or not, Trump is continuing that, and that's why they're continuing to fund the refugee resettlement program, which funds the unaccompanied minors. I mean, this is another big one. Let's go down the list. Revoke licenses of nonprofits aiding and abetting illegal aliens. We have not done that yet. Clamp down on identity theft. Verify ID at every point ID is required. Creating an aggravated ID theft law. Requiring cops to check immigration status at every lawful stop. Only a couple of states are doing this. Enhanced penalties at a state level for obstructing, impeding, or attacking ICE officers. Prohibiting any renting to or financial benefit from illegal aliens. That is a Tennessee law that passed. I believe it's the only state that has done that. And then obviously we've talked about this a lot, but the whole trucking stuff. Any illegal caught in a truck, driving a truck in the state, 10 years in prison. And the president should encourage states to pass this, but also if you have one bill in a year to pass, this should have been that bill. And then this ties into the third thing, which is the courts and jurisdiction stripping. Okay? Jurisdiction stripping. Chip Roy had the bills, had the amendments to budget reconciliation. It was not supported by the administration. In fact, the White House, to my knowledge, scoffed at it. So this is pathetic. What are we even doing? I just wanted to open your mind and heart as to what you could have done. And again, if you were to do all this, pass this at a federal level, encourage it at a state level, over time, it would be very difficult for them to remain here. But the president let the cat out of the bag. I mean, it's not just, maybe he hasn't focused on enforcing it. He told them to do the opposite. He doesn't want it. And then, of course, there's obviously the rioting that is grinding down the enforcement and also making it unpopular. 12 months ago, he warned, and he still has not invoked the Insurrection Act. It's pretty pathetic. He has not invoked the Insurrection Act. So they continue with impunity. Oh, Daniel, the courts. Well, you know what? Go tell the courts to pound sand or at least pass a reconciliation bill. And in fact, when we're going to get to this in the next segment, the president is encouraging Congress. The Freedom Caucus is fighting this, but the White House is on the other side, encouraging them to pass bills funding these same policies. And then meanwhile, you have Kristi Noem or photo ops that just make this look like a joke. See, have you ever seen Ron DeSantis at, his press conferences with law enforcement? Your swing voter might be, well, maybe he's a little bit more right-wing than I am, but he sounds like he means what he says. He says what he means. He has a sense of purpose. There's no games being played there. That's how you make an issue more popular, not less popular. So we're not putting down the rebellion. By the way, this military veteran by the name of S2 Underground, guy on Twitter, did his own research. He listed by name 55 organizations aiding and abetting illegal alien rioters. There is a current statute, 8 U.S.C. 1324, that criminalizes knowingly concealing, harboring, shielding from detection any illegal alien in America. It was recently upheld by the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. I don't see federal prosecutors using it. So that's what I'm saying. It's not that he hasn't attempted and embarked on a couple of these items, but hasn't seen any of them through, and a lot of them hasn't even started on, because this is not his primary focus. I'm sorry to tell you that. It's all, and to the extent it is, it's a photo op. It's all the juvenile, superficial, like the kids look at the color of a book. That's sort of his focus. It's pathetic. It is what it is. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm sorry to tell you this. So that's what that. And then of course, look, there is logistics. There is the logistical aspect of this. I said from day one, you need to use ships instead of planes. Planes are very highly pressurized. There's a lot of security issues. You need ice on it. Very tight quarters. You can only fly home like 150 at a time. You have to have the host government cooperate, which a lot of them don't, to be willing to land a plane. Whereas ships are logistically much more synergistic. In the military, they always say it's not about tactics, it's about logistics. Whoever controls logistics wins. Every year we have roughly $1 billion appropriation for something called the Department of Transportation's National Defense Reserve Fleet. What is this fleet? They have a ready reserve force staffing that has ships available, about 100 ships, mostly cargo and big tankers that could be ready to go within a few day window for emergencies like national disasters. They could have been used for deportation, aside from the Marines and naval vessels. But I'm saying just the DOT. They have 41 vessels stationed at 18 ports, particularly along the Gulf Coast. This is something we could have easily done the entire time to be a force multiplier. Each one has 1,000-person capacity, much greater than the 100 or so from these planes. They have a 14-day supply in terms of food, water, and sewage. They have medical supplies, helicopter landing pads, roll-on, roll-off capacity for vehicles. So they got a lot of this. It was used during Hurricane Harvey. And again, it's a matter of controlling logistics. It's cheaper too. It costs almost $25,000 per flight of a C-17 Globemaster, although they're not using military now. They're using commercial, which is even more cumbersome. Imagine having to go through commercial traffic in order to remove one plane of illegals. Here you could do what you want. It's much cheaper. That's why we do most stuff through shipping. So there's a lot more where this came from. But this is just a matter of 4 or 5 things I gave you, each one with multiple ideas that could have been done, all the while properly messaging using the bully pulpit. But instead, we got the Gaza board and I need a Nobel Prize and Jelani and Qatar Akbar and Greenland and tariffs and Venezuela. I mean, look, if that's what you want to put your capital on, and then, all the while focus on nothing related to codifying what you're doing in Congress, then knock yourself out. And that leads me to my second half of the show today, which is the appropriation bills. The appropriation bills. Everything is with the spending bills. And not only is Trump not codifying his policies, his executive orders on immigration, on spending, on personnel cuts in these bills, he's codifying Biden levels, and with some programs actually increasing spending, which will increase inflation. Exact same dynamic of the first term, tweet hard, executive order hard, but then fund the Democrat agenda on the bills that actually matter and will cement enduring policy. So we know that in all aspects of life, money talks, BS walks. Talk is cheap. But this is especially true in politics. So when Trump says, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I put out a press release and a tweet and a executive order, but then with the funding bills, the spending bills, he actually pressures conservatives to support bills that are actually totally supported by the Democrats. There's something wrong there. I talked about this throughout his first term. He would promise, put out a budget, which is not binding because the Congress passed the budget, saying, I'm going to cut HUD by 50%. And he did that this time as well. And then his ledge team will write a bill for leadership, codifying the highest Democrat levels of spending, jettisoning all of our priorities, not codifying most of his executive orders. And look, the Democrats know that they smell blood in the water. Democrats, they are crushing it. They're up 6-8 points in generic ballot. They have no reason to fear him. They're saying he's a Nazi. They have the momentum. Even immigration enforcement is becoming unpopular, certainly on the economy. So they would fight. If they found anything offensive in these bills, they would fight it. Democrats are celebrating the Trump appropriation bills that will determine the long-term trajectory of policy personnel and spending levels and priorities in this administration, much less the next Democrat administration. What is going on here? It's pathetic. And by the way, the only reason the Democrats fought last time was not on any of this. It was on the Obamacare subsidies. Now that that fight is over with, do you understand that it's amazing? And everyone's talking about it. They're actually passing regular order, full appropriation bills with bipartisan support. So the House is on the brink of passing today. The Senate will pass later the entire fiscal year 2026 funding bills. 10 days ahead of or 9 days ahead of the January 30th deadline. They're packaging, they already passed a few of them. So now they have most covered. There's 12 appropriation bills. They have 6 of them packaged in this minibus bill, about 1,100 pages, $1.2 trillion. Defense, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, Transportation, Housing, and related agencies. That's a lot of, there's a lot of points of contention, right? Education, housing, defense, Homeland Security. Between all the things Trump promised, I mean, you would think Democrats would be lying down on the tracks. Yet, as it stands now, they're going to pass every one of them. They're downright proud of all of them, except for DHS. And even DHS, they're like, we wish it were better, but we got rid of a lot of their poison pills, and it's not the ICE provisions and funding levels that Trump wanted, so we're happy. In other words, they don't see, what's not in the DHS funding bill. Any of the things I laid out. So it won't be enduring. So you have, let's take education. Okay? They are funding those departments at roughly either $221 billion according to Republicans or $224 billion according to Democrats. Do you know what last year's spending was? 221. So it's either the same or slightly more than Biden's final year in office. And this is labor, HHS, education. Okay, this is like the cesspool for the right that you would think we would cut. If there's anything to cut, nothing. The National Institutes of Health would receive $48.7 billion, which is $415 million over the enacted level. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, it is cut by $1 billion, but it's still getting $5.2 billion. But if Trump supposedly shut it down, then why are we funding it at all? CDC, we're going to take an axe to that. Nope, $9.1 billion. It's not an increase, but Biden's final highest level. And what about the Department of Education? Trump abolished it, right? Well, actually, it would receive $78.7 billion in discretionary spending, not to mention the mandatory with the Pell Grants. Pretty much a tiny increase from Biden's levels, but roughly the same. So whatever happened to abolishing the Department of Education? I just don't get it. But this is where we are. It would prohibit the administration. It actually has a Democrat rider. It would prohibit the administration from transferring DOE funding to other agencies, which was his plan. And they got it. I'm going to read to you the top Democrat in the Senate, on the Senate Appropriations Committee. So Patty Murray from Washington State, she is the vice chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So she's a communist. She is the lead Democrat on this issue. So you would think she'd say, this is a Nazi budget, taking food out of people's mouths and cutting spending and, Trump's lawless dictatorship funding. You would think, right? I mean, something's got to give. Here's what her message was. These bills invest in working people across the country, utterly reject President Trump's plan to defund the kids' education, evict millions of families, slash life-saving medical research nearly in half. The message to President Trump is America will continue to fund cancer research. We're going to keep investing in affordable housing. We'll talk about that. Congress will not abolish the Department of Education. Democrats were at the table. This legislation staves off extreme cuts that would jeopardize people's health and livelihoods. We protected K through 12 and childcare and Pell Grants and all this stuff. Students nationwide, mental health. The package invests in our service members. They don't seem to have anything offensive about the military that they don't like. Each of these bills reasserts Congress's power over the purse, ensures that Congress, not President Trump and Russ Vogt, decide how taxpayer dollars get spent. While there's a whole lot more I wish these bills would have addressed, these compromise bills protect critical investments, reject heartless cuts, and they're significantly better outcome than another year-long CR. Even the DHS bill, which was the biggest point of contention, she said, Democrats defeated Republicans' hard-fought push to give ICE an even bigger annual budget, successfully cut ICE's detention budget and capacity, cut CBP's budget by over $1 billion, and secured important, though still insufficient new constraints on DHS, and they rejected 85 poison pill riders, including the House Republican draft. So, folks, two things can't be true at one time. That Trump is fundamentally altering every department of government, every sphere of policy, but at the same time, Democrats are actually praising the very budget bills that fund it even now under Trump, much less what you're going to get in the future in 3 years when Democrats come in. So one of those two things is not true. And I think the not true part is that Trump fundamentally changed anything. Executive orders and BS and tweets walk, budget bills talk. And that's just the way it is. Again, I'm sorry if that's offensive to people. And I want to get to one interesting part of this, which is housing. So with housing, it's just classic. We did this in the first term endlessly with housing. So Trump promised to cut in his budget $46 billion from HUD. Basically cut it in half, which we should do. If there's ever anything that should be done at a local level, it's housing. Okay, we should not have federal housing programs. So first off, before we get to the probes bill, let's just start off with Trump's executive order. A couple days ago, he signed his order banning institutional buyers from purchasing residential homes. But as I predicted, he had a carve out for build to rent, which is most of it. So if that's your big issue, it carves out most of it because that's what the corporations want. And even on the part of institutional buyers of existing residential property, it doesn't ban it because he can't ban it. He needs Congress, and he knows he doesn't have the authority. So the order just limits where the feds are involved. So through various means of Freddie and Fannie loan backing and mortgage guarantees by the FHA. So for better or for worse, it's a nothing burger. Scott Bessent has recently been talking a lot about mom and pop realtors because the reality is most of the inventory is by people owning 1 to 5. Anyone who dabbles in real estate, not the corporations, they really don't account for a lot of it. They're selling off their inventory because they know prices are dropping. And again, there's a lot of news. Prices really are dropping if you would just let them drop. But this bill, okay, so here's the thing. They actually, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. Trump promised to cut HUD by $46 billion. The bill that the administration is now supporting, the one that will actually be signed into law, increases it by $7.3 billion. All of these programs that artificially juice up housing, get government involved in Section 8, it has completely been increased. So this entire thing is a complete joke. And that's what keeps housing going up. You know, it provides 38.4 billion for Section 8 vouchers. That's a 2.4 billion increase over Biden's final level. 18.5 billion for project-based rental assistance. That's a 1.7 billion increase from Biden. 8.3 billion for public housing. All these different programs. 1 billion for elderly housing. 287 million for disability housing. It would provide 4.4 billion in homeless assistance grants, which again, this should be done at a state level. It increases the continuum of care program, the home, the community development block grant program, which Trump promised both last term and this term to abolish. It gets increased. So this entire thing is a freaking joke. Okay. And by the way, on the housing thing, it is hilarious. So you know how Trump's focus is, rather than bringing down pricing, actually bringing them up, but on lowering the mortgage rate. Because again, he wants more debt. But the reality is you're going to get neither. So one of the things he did was announce that Freddie and Fannie are going to buy and back 200 billion of mortgage securities. So as I noted, that's going to raise the price. But his goal with that is that it often does drop mortgage rates. And indeed, the mortgage rate dropped a little bit for the first 5 days or so after the announcement. Guess what? The 10-year treasury and the corresponding 30-year fixed mortgage rate is now, it was like 5.988. It dropped below 6. It's now like 6.25 because the 10-year treasury went up. You know why it went up? Because we're servicing record debt and we're printing more treasuries and we're a dumpster fire. And that's why gold and silver are going crazy. So you can't continue with all this debt-driven spending, all the subsidies, all the bubble assets, but be like, oh, I'm going to drop the rates to zero. You could drop the rates all you want. They won't drop. I'm sorry. That's the simple reality of supply and demand, of debt structuring, and take it for what it is. So the broad point is that on the very issues that he promises to change, cut personnel, fire personnel, change policies, cut spending, he will literally increase spending on the very programs his budget promises to cut. This has been an annual ritual with his OMB director since his first term. He'll put out a budget blueprint, right? Pursuant to the Budget Control Act, the president's supposed to send a budget. Just here are my priorities. Obviously, it's non-binding. And I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut that. It's a really good budget. And then he summarily supports every single bill that increases spending on every account that he promised to cut. It's like, again, there's these two playing fields. There's the braggadocious press release playing field, and then there's the money, the spending bills, the actual codification, the courts. That's what matters, and how you handle the courts. This whole thing's a joke. It really is. And by the way, it's not like, oh, yeah, the rhinos in Congress are doing this. Okay, right now as we speak, the Freedom Caucus is holding up some of this stuff, demanding more from it. They're getting calls from admin officials threatening them, as they always do. So I don't want to hear this, oh, it's Mike Johnson doing it, it's John Thune doing it. In fact, if we're just those guys, the Freedom Caucus could probably get more out of it than when Trump is fighting them. So at some point, we need to ask, is it Trump that's undermining the Trump agenda? Because every time that conservatives in Congress try to codify his executive orders and his stated policies, the administration calls them up and beats them up. So I'm not sure what you want from these guys, but they're trying everything they can. But you got to give them some leeway. Oh, and by the way, the defense appropriation bill, remember that? It actually has more funding than the president even asked for, but also 400 million in additional funding for, you guessed it, Ukraine. So this entire thing is an utter charade. The fake immigration enforcement, the fake spending cuts, and even the policy reforms. And this is now. You could imagine when Democrats come back in. And then all you're left with is everything's more unpopular. And as I've been talking about all week, Trump endorsed rhinos in every red state governorship. So now you can't even have a residual fortress of liberty from which to launch a counterattack against the next Democrat Fourth Reich because you're full of a bunch of corporatist Republicans that don't want to do anything. So you get all the liabilities, but none of the benefits. How is this not a Pfizer shot? Well, maybe then again, for a man that his modus operandi is nothing but negative efficacy, maybe that's why Trump loves the COVID shots. By the way, nothing embodies this fraud more than Trump at Davos, at the WEF, announcing how much he loved the COVID shots. Take a listen.
And we ended up with the COVID, and the whole world suffered. We did a phenomenal job. I don't think we got the credit we deserved. We did something that Operation Warp Speed, which some people say was one of the greatest military feats ever. We did a great job. Use our military.
Yeah, some say it was the most effective shot. And by the way, you notice how he said the military was involved. We always knew that with DARPA. It was a bioweapon, and it's nice that he actually dropped that in there, a military operation. It's not my words, this is the president's words. But this is the thing, and again, like, this is where his priorities are. Let's go to foreign policy, and we'll land the plane with foreign policy for today. Again, nothing embodies more globalism than Trump with Jared Kushner signing the Gaza Peace Board at a WEF conference. How pathetic. The presentation featured Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who presented a slideshow showing the redevelopment of Gaza with shiny skyscrapers. And Kushner said there's no plan B if Hamas doesn't demilitarize. Well, Hamas already announced that they're not demilitarizing, and they're not, and they're still in control, and they will be in control. But I guess you'll have Hamas with skyscrapers. So that is really in our best interest to expend all of our time, treasure, and talent rebuilding Gaza. Man, I could not have thought of a better way to expend this narrow electoral capital rather than on inflation and immigration. But yeah, I mean, this is where we are. Oh, and what else have we spent our capital on? So I haven't gotten a chance to talk about this a lot. I do have this in my Substack. I've been writing about foreign policy as well as all of our AI tech stuff that I haven't gotten a chance to get to on the show. So you want to really make sure you subscribe. If you are watching here, you could point in the top left corner, put your phone up to this, and you'll subscribe. The Substack, Daniel Horowitz, Liberating Truths. But anyway, the president has literally allied with the Syrian al-Qaeda leader Jalani. This is a big problem, folks. The president bragged for the last 8 years about the fact that he defeated ISIS. Now, I actually opposed our involvement, tipping the balance of power towards one versus the other. This was Iran's problem, but fine, that's your thing. So ISIS. Then he goes and backs Jalani, who would never have had the authority to do this. He is massacring Christians, massacring the Druze, and now massacring the Kurds, reclaimed Raqqa, set all the prisons free of the ISIS and al-Qaeda fighters, and then now we're going and sending in the military to fight the ISIS that was released by the guy that we're backing. This animal, backed by Qatar and Turkey, utter animal, should have been arrested. Instead, he was given state-like treatment when he came to the White House. What a disgrace for the Oval Office. And again, I'm not asking that we help the Kurds out, but we've invested so much in the Kurds for years, and now we're literally investing in the guy to slaughter them. It's truly disgusting. Because do you know who wants to slaughter them? Qatar and Turkey. By the way, I have new figures, all-time lobbying numbers. Israel has spent $1.8 billion all-time on lobbying. Do you know how much Qatar has spent? $23.4 billion. That's a fact. Where are all the people just asking questions on Qatar? They spend almost $142 per person to lobby the U.S. versus Israel is $2.31. Now, I don't believe in any foreign lobbying, but I'm just saying part of the problem with Israel is, well, yeah, if we give all this aid to Egypt and Jordan and Turkey and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and then have yay much lobbying. So, yeah, you better believe they're going to lobby, especially when we, demand that they stop defending themselves and can't build houses here. My thing is, don't give them any money, have no foreign lobbying, but don't give their enemies money and stop telling them what to do. Just stay out of it and focus on immigration, inflation, and that sort of stuff. But again, there's no pay for play involved in that. There's a lot more involved here. So Jelani is the globalist Islamist golden boy now. And yeah, by the way, the Syrian ambassador recently said that Tom Barrack, he said that the original purpose of the SDF, that's the Kurdish forces, has largely expired. So nice to know you, Kurds. Hope you enjoy the slaughter. Now they're flying the ISIS flag over Raqqa. That used to be the ISIS capital. Then they were kicked out, and now they kicked the Kurds out. So, again, like I wouldn't get involved, but for free, we had the Kurds controlling it rather than ISIS. I think we'd all rather the Kurds. Now we helped facilitate the takeover of that as well. And meanwhile, the president at the WEF in Davos said that Jelani is making tremendous progress. Yeah, no kidding. He is making tremendous progress. So, like, I don't even know what we're doing here. But, folks, this is the sort of presentation you're not going to hear anywhere else in conservative media. By the way, it's interesting. I've noticed since I started doing YouTube, any clip I cut about vaccines or data centers gets literally 0 to 5 views, which is impossible. So they completely shadow ban me. That's why I need you to directly subscribe at Horowitz Show on YouTube and directly subscribe to the Substack, Daniel Horowitz at Liberating Truth. Send me your comments, questions, concerns at Daniel Horowitz at startmail.com is my email. Also, make sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Otherwise, you will not hear a presentation like today's show. I promise you anywhere else. Send this to everyone you know who's interested in the unbiased truth. Till tomorrow, Micah 6:8. God bless y'all. And thank you for listening.